G'day, ZiggyD here. Now with ExilePro dropping off the face of the earth recently, a lot of people have been looking for a new Path of Exile builds site. Now I've seen plenty of these sites come and go over time, and I kinda don't really I hesitate to recommend one until I think it's actually going to stick around. So today I'm happy to present to you guys PathofPoE. Yes, that name is hilarious. I think the creator has done a pretty good job coming up with that name. Path of Exile. Nonetheless, the site looks and works fantastically, and I think it has a lot of potential, and most importantly, I think it's going to stick around for a long time. The problem with ExilePro, although it had some of the best builds around at the time, is that it was being run by a bunch of people who already spend the 95% of their time creating other forms of content. They didn't really have time to administer the site. And yeah, Curse kind of just let that fall apart. So, however, PathofPoE is run by the community and by a fairly dedicated looking creator, so I think it has a lot of potential to stick around. So I'll give you guys a rundown on how to go about using it. Pretty basic stuff really, and it's really well designed, it looks pretty smooth, so pretty easy to get the sense of how to go about working it. First off, I just want to point out that they're using this new diagram system here that someone suggested a while back on Reddit, and it's a good way to illustrate, like have an image example of how the build plays. Essentially, you have these different aspects here. You have ease of play, offense, defense, solo, party, mapability, and affordability. And basically, the person who creates the build simply plots out on this graph where they think the build lies in each of those points. Obviously, you know, it's up to the honesty of the creator to say how good it is actually to play, and some people might be a little bit more generous with their builds, but it still gives you a good sense of how the build can go. And if it's a high-rated build, it probably matches up to what they've suggested. So, for example, you can actually say, I want a really high DPS build for softcore, and you go along and you see something like this. I have a lot of currency to spend. This build is not affordable. It requires a Voltaxic Rift and a high crit-based gear as well. Just from the name of that, you can tell. And the offense is off the chart, whereas the affordability is right back here, so scoring really low. It's also a very good map build. Once you actually get it set up, it's easy to play, works well in parties, works okay solo, and has pretty low defense because it's a softcore build. So this gives you a good depiction of how the build actually plays, and I think that's a fantastic sort of medium to use to convey the overall sense of the build. It doesn't tell you everything about a build, of course, but it's still a pretty good idea, and I'll probably be including this sort of chart in my builds in the future. So, on that note, to actually search for builds on this site, it's pretty simple stuff. You can select the class you want, so you can go, say you want to find a duelist, you can simply search for duelists, and start off with no other methods of sorting. You'll come up with all of the different duelists, and you can scroll through with these sorts of things. However, then you can sort by league, and you can sort by each of these points on this graph. So if I want the highest offense duelist builds sorted by that, we'll see here is the highest offense rated duelist, and that's an easy way to find that, so that's pretty cool stuff. Otherwise, you can go just by a rating method to find what people generally have voted to be the best sort of build. Of course, you can easily do the same thing here and just find the best rated builds on the site. So pretty simple stuff, pretty self-explanatory, but really well put together. Now, the important thing with this sort of site is it is pretty much run by the community. How good this site ends up being in the long term and how up to date it is depends entirely on you guys. Either submitting builds, so if you've created your own build, or if you know of a good build that someone else has done and you want to take the time to put it up on the site, then that is amazing. That's one of the best things you can do for the community. Otherwise, if you're not so good at creating builds, but you try one of these builds and then think it matches up exactly what the author said it would do, works really well, and works exactly as they said, go ahead and give these builds a rating. That's super important, because the problem with a community administered builds site, which is why ExilePro went the route it did, is that you don't really know how good community created builds can be. There's a lot of people out there making builds, and sometimes they might have worked well for them for some reason, but they might not have a full grasp or understanding of why their build worked well, or why it didn't work well, or why it's not a good build in general. So it's up to the community to rate these builds so that the rest of us know how well they work. So as you can tell here, this build has 8 votes, and it's scored pretty highly on this ranking, so it's a pretty safe bet that this build works pretty much as described. But if this build hadn't been voted on, there's really no way for us to tell that sort of thing without trying it out self. So jump on here, either create some builds and add some yourself, or simply try some out and give them a rating. Anyway, hopefully you enjoy it. I'm ZiggyD, and thanks for watching.